speaker series, and thank you very much for joining us for this program here today. We're live here in the National Chiefs Mess of the United States Navy Memorial. As you know, the mission here at the Navy Memorial is to honor, recognize, and celebrate the men and women of the sea services, past, present, and future, and to inform the public about their service. As you know, this event focuses on the fourth verb in that mission, to inform. Today's live, interactive, online event is on the record and available to naval enthusiasts around the country. And as you can see on your computer, you're able to ask questions on the platform, and I will be selecting questions from the audience as we progress. So please do send in your questions. We're honored today that our guest is the Chief of Naval Personnel, Vice Admiral Rick Cheeseman. But before we get started, I would like to thank our sponsor, Navy Mutual, who, without them, we could not do what we do. Navy Mutual provides affordable life insurance to service members, to those who serve and those who have served in our military and for our country. We couldn't do what we do without their support. So it is now my honor to introduce our guest, Vice Admiral Rick Cheeseman, a graduate of Penn State University, a career surface warfare officer. He served on guided missile cruisers, guided missile destroyers, guided missile frigates, an oiler replenishment ship, and he's commanded the USS Bulkley, a guided missile destroyer, and the USS, I think it was the Monterey, right?
Yes, sir.
Monterey, a cruiser. He currently now serves as the Chief of Naval Personnel, having had extensive opportunities as a flag officer, and before that even being in the personnel business. As a flag officer, Admiral Cheeseman has commanded both Carrier Strike Group 10 and Carrier Strike Group 2, and as the Assistant Commander of Navy Personnel Command for Career Management, affectionately known as PERS 4 in the Navy. Admiral Cheeseman assumed duties as the Chief of Naval Personnel in June of 2022 and is responsible for planning and programming of all manpower, personnel, and training resources for our Navy. Admiral, thank you very much for joining us today.
Sir, it is my pleasure to be here. Thanks for the opportunity.
So, Admiral Cheeseman, we've gone through your biography and we've heard the official part, but as a Chief of Naval Personnel, you're the people person.
I am.
Tell us a little bit about you.
Sure, I appreciate that. So, grew up in a small town in New Jersey, Carneys Point, New Jersey, right at the base of the Delaware Memorial Bridge. Die-hard Philadelphia Phillies and Philadelphia Eagles fan, so go Birds.
So this show might be over right there.
It might be. We'll see. But I've got all day, so whatever you want. As you mentioned, went to Penn State on an ROTC scholarship. Really was just looking for a way to pay for college and had no real intention of staying in the Navy long term. You get commissioned, you go out and you start working with people and you find a reason to stay. So despite resigning twice and trying to figure it out, I have really enjoyed my career long term. All my sea tours have been out of Norfolk. The majority of my shore tours have been not in Norfolk. So I've been all over the world and I've really enjoyed it. I have left out the most important part though. Met Barbara right at the end of my first sea tour. Married Barbara, raised 3 kids. They're all married now. I have 5 grandchildren. I'm in the people business at home and at work, and I really enjoy it.
And I think you were saying earlier, your father was a chief petty officer.
My father-in-law was a chief petty officer. That's right. He from I think 59 to 82 he served, but really enjoyed the learning from him as well. And Barbara mentions it all the time. She's been in the Navy longer than me. She was born at Portsmouth Naval Hospital, so she keeps me straight.
So, Admiral, when we walked in here today, we pride ourselves at the Navy Memorial on starting its program on time. And for the first time, this one was at risk. When we walked in, clearly we couldn't have staged it better.
Sure.
As the person in charge of personnel policy, a gentleman walked up to you and said, hey, are you an Admiral? Would you talk to my daughter?
Right.
Can you tell us a little bit about what happened? Because I think that tells the story of Rick Cheeseman.
I can. It was the best part of my day, best part of my week. It was fantastic. As you mentioned, gentleman walks up and says exactly what you said, and I met a young lady who recently graduated from high school. She talked about Friday, so it's last Friday, this Friday, whatever it is. But she goes to boot camp in 3 weeks, and she was just in awe of talking about the opportunity, how she's been looking forward to it. What she's decided to do in the Navy, how she wants to, learn from folks as soon as they get there. So It was just tremendously rewarding, talking about, the things that we want to, our young people to think about. She's locked in on what she wants to do. I gave her a coin. It was awesome. She was, staring at that. I told her to use it as a free pass at MEPS. We'll see how it goes. But it was incredibly rewarding to talk to her. It was great.
That's amazing. The excitement that was in your eyes when that dad told you that was amazing.
It was awesome.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about your job as CNP, and probably rather than ask a general question about the job I'd like to to talk about My Navy HR and the strategic design that the Navy has to move forward. That's probably a good focus area to start. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I can. Thanks for that. Everybody knows in the Chief of Naval Personnel world, in the My Navy HR world, what our mission is. Our mission is personnel readiness, right? That's obvious. Whether you're dealing with people policy, whether you're dealing with a program, whether you're dealing with a black box widget to make things better for somebody, that's what it's all about. But when you distill it down, there's 1,000 things or so that we're doing every day to work for sailors in our Navy. So what we wanted to do over time was to really distill it into 5 core functions and really talk about our vision. Our vision is mission-focused sailors. We want sailors and their families to trust us in My Navy HR to do all the things that needs to be done to take care of them and their families so they can focus solely on the mission. And we've worked really hard over the last couple of years to build back some trust from recent years where we've struggled in that area. When we come down to, hey, what is My Navy HR working on? It comes down to 5 things. And as mentioned, there's thousands of things behind each one of those pillars, but it comes down to billet-based advancement. We are merging our distribution and advancement systems in the future. That's ongoing, but that's one core tenet. A second is ready, relevant learning. How do we modernize not just the content, but the content delivery systems for our training pipelines? Third is how do we advance our Navy culture? How do we make it better every day? And I can talk into some detail there. And the 4th and 5th pillar are related. It is the modernization of HR delivery services. How do we go through business process reengineering to do things smarter for the average sailor? And then the IT that supports that and all the other functions. So really been in those areas is what we're trying to get at. And we try to maintain some sort of discipline in how we're working on things. And if we're not working on something that's related to those 5 things, we probably just should not be doing it.
So the magnitude of what the Chief of Navy Personnel has between recruiting and Navy Personnel Command, et cetera, and full disclosure, when I was at the Chief of Naval Personnel's PAO back in the early 2000s, there's so much to do.
There is.
And so much effort that goes on through the staff. Those pillars, that structure gives a framework to do it. But there's still, how do you drill down in guidance for the team? What are your priorities? I mean, do you have priorities that you've passed on to the team to what to get done, what to focus on?
Well, I didn't have any, like when we did the design, I didn't say, hey, and here are the priorities, because those things can move over time. Right now, the number one priority for the Navy is recruiting. We have to, get that squared away, and we have some recent good news on that front. The initial thought when we got into the job was the working on sailor pay. A lot of thoughts on that over the last couple of years. We just weren't in a good spot. We've made a lot of strides going forward there with sailor pay, with updating the IT systems, with getting into the plans and policy to make sure we are getting inside of DoD standards for all transactions for sailors. Third, I think going forward is that advancing the Navy culture piece. It can't just be echelon 1, hey, here's policy, here's how you're going to do culture, and then we just step away from it. So we're actively involved with communities and Navy leadership, and how do we get down to the deck plate level in all communities to make sure that every sailor understands where we're going there. And I would say 4th, going forward, it really is about billet-based advancement. That's going to be, that is one of the big things we're doing. But we're starting to add some complexity there. More ratings are going into that merger between distribution and advancement. We're expanding the senior enlisted marketplace. We're paying attention to that and how it shapes sailor decision making and retention behavior, and whether sailors feel like we're taking care of them and their families or not will be pretty important going forward.
So I want to try to touch on as many of those as we can.
Sure.
We're going to save recruiting for the second block here
Great.
today, because I'd like to spend some significant amount of time on that. You talked about culture.
Yes.
And we pride ourselves on the Navy in culture. But it seems like, as you talk about, it's a priority of yours, and it seems like you've you're taking that to another level with what you're calling Culture of Excellence 2.0.
Yes, sir.
What is that?
So Culture of Excellence 2.0 is the Navy's deliberate effort at building great people, great teams, and great leaders. So a couple years ago, we know we've been very vocal in the Navy about get real, get better. How do we think, act, and operate differently? And this culture effort that we announced in March really is getting at that. We first started with, hey, looking at all of our existing programs, and as you can imagine, there's stacks and stacks of programs that tell a commanding officer how to affect great culture. But we wanted to distill that down into a usable playbook so triads can generate the outcomes they need for their individual. Get through the day first, get through the mission second. It's pretty important there. And then from a leader perspective, leaders, character, competence, and the culture that they build. Training to that, making sure commanding officers and leaders understand their responsibilities. And then third, the culture piece. Clearly outcome driven, making sure that we understand what you need to build to focus in combat, to deliver lethality. So when our sailors go over the horizon, they can get the job done. So they can focus on when they're back here doing the hardest things, not in combat, supporting others, so they can get through that. And then taking care of everybody else going forward. So we think this is a deliberate strategy to get at it, and we're seeing good results so far.
So when you talk about culture, your time frame in the Navy has spanned some incredible culture changes.
Sure.
And you mentioned several of them. Another one is women in the Navy. It seems to me that we are at a period, I have an opportunity to watch from the outside
Sure.
now, right? And it seems to me we're transitioning from women firsts, women breaking glass ceilings, to women as mentors, women as leaders, women as examples. And you struck out on creating what you call a Navy Women's Initiative Team.
Yes, sir.
What is that?
The Women's Initiative Team is just a formalized effort to bring up concerns from a subset of the population in a more formal manner. We've always had the informal discussions, always had the informal avenues to get to different policymakers. But quite frankly, taking a step from our Army and Air Force counterparts who are already doing this, it's just a formalized way of tracking concerns to make sure we have a properly inclusive environment. The Navy is a place where every American should be able to see themselves succeeding. So standing this team up so we can just formalize any issues, any concerns that a part of our population has can be a powerful thing. We just had a very first meeting on this, a couple weeks ago. 35 commands represented from all the different TICOMs and community leads. Really nice discussion on mostly process at this point to make sure we understand how we're going to do things and track things. But it's gaining traction, and we enjoy the effort.
Would you agree with that observation about that when I hear you say you have 35 commands represented, that we've really gone, we've passed a significant milestone in the Navy where it's now just a part of life?
Absolutely. It's absolutely a part of life. I mean, anybody who's in this country should be able to serve, and being able to create an environment where they can see themselves succeeding. That's all we're trying to do. That's all we're trying to do. It's really helpful. And from the 35 commands, it's not necessarily down to the individual command level, but it's the aggregation of the type commanders, the community leaders, because they're aggregating the issues below them. It's not everything comes to echelon for decision.
Yeah.
It is, here's what we're doing, here's how we're creating inclusive culture where we are, here's how we're addressing these issues, and we share information and ideas for best practices, and then when policy needs to be addressed, we address it.
Wow. All right, let me shift courses a little bit. You mentioned pay and challenges with pay that you've been working to remedy. Can you talk a little bit about what you're doing there with sailor pay?
I can, absolutely. It is a good news story. First, to be clear, right now in the United States Navy, we are inside of all Department of Defense standards on timeliness. And when we talk about sailor pay, there's, people will conflate that issue. Everybody's getting their paycheck on the 1st and the 15th. We're 99.9% accurate, best in DOD when it comes to that. When we talked about the issues in pay, it was always about the special transactions. Was my travel claim processed in a timely manner? Was my retirement or my separation process in a timely manner? Inside, we codified who was actually doing the work in my organization. A lot of overtime to get at this, to get into us. Our civilian workforce at the My Navy Career Center really working hard here to get us back in step. And it really was a great effort between Fleet, the rest of the Navy, and my team in making sure we're just taking care of sailors and getting it done. So, like I said, we're back in Department of Defense standards now. I am certain, though, there are big, hairy cases out there that I'm not aware of, and that's the next step, is building a fully transparent transaction system so everybody can see, where those transactions are, so we can be more informative. And part of that transparency is, and I should have mentioned on the front end, we built a couple dashboards associated with this. One, a unified financial command report, and one, a CPPA, the Command Pay and Personnel Assistant Dashboard. So any given triad now, any unit in the Navy can look and see where every one of their sailors' transactions are. And if it's in a logjam somewhere, either at the command level or in my level, we can just take action on it and make sure we clear it. So a lot of visibility on what we're getting done here.
So that kind of ties back to your point earlier about get real, get better, right? I mean, a dashboard that, because sometimes the problems are solved when they get to the right
Absolutely.
level. And that's the Navy culture.
Absolutely.
The downside of the Navy culture is, I can fix this. I don't need to go to my boss. I can
Right.
fix this, right? It's that classic Navy chief who's going to pedal as fast as he can to
Right.
fix it, or the junior officer who's working hard. So this idea that it kind of all ties together in my mind, that just be able to report, hey, we've got a problem here.
Absolutely. We had normalized substandard behavior, and sailors are suffering in silence because that's just the way it is. It should not take 4 months for us to do a travel claim. It should not take 4 months for it to be inputted on the front end. So once everybody understands the roles and responsibilities, much better now. Again, I'm certain somebody out there is suffering in silence, and we gotta fix it. But the transparency of the systems will help us in that respect. Where it was particularly egregious for me was in the retirement area, where sailors were retiring after 20 plus years of honorable service, and we couldn't get them their DD-214 on time. We could not get their retirement account paid out on time or set up on time. So pretty important there to keep charging there and make sure none of those sailors are lost from us. I don't want them leaving service with a sour taste in their mouth. I want them to be a sailor for life.
Yeah. So you used a term earlier in your answer, My Navy Career Center.
Yes, sir.
That's a term that most of the viewers probably are not familiar
That's
with.
right.
What is My Navy Career Center?
So My Navy Career Center it's a call center in Millington, Tennessee. There's a backup call center in Little Creek, Virginia. That is the hub for all pay and personnel transactions. Any sailor, and any sailor's family can call that phone number, 1-800-ASK-MNCC, and get an operator on the line and have their questions about their pay or personnel record answered. If that happens there, that's essentially tier 0. It's a tiered delivery model. If the operator there, by looking in the record and looking in the systems, can't figure out the answer, it gets handed off to somebody in Millington. There's a pro cell down there that deals with really hairy cases for us. But there's a team of professionals on that campus in Millington that's their day job is handling these situations. So a case gets built, the sailor gets it, or the family member gets a case number so they can track it, and then we try to get them an answer within 24 hours. If it can't get done at tier 1 level because it's a policy issue, it gets pushed to us in DC. We work through it. But where we need to make sure we have really good feedback here is the communication back and forth. Too many times sailors will call, they may not get the answer, and we may not get back to them in a timely manner. So that's the next step, is making sure we get back to them with a resolution in a timely manner. But it's a good process. And anybody who's visiting Millington should go visit that place. It is impressive. They can sit in on a call, talk to a sailor. It's great.
As vast as the personnel program
Right.
in the Navy, I remember when I got to CMP, the workflow, all the diagrams,
Yes.
and the software programs were a monster. How do you get your arms around that from a culture perspective to create not just solving problems, maybe not just giving people fish, but teaching them how to fish?
Yes. Your point about data and his point about data, well taken, right? And the journey we've been on has all been data driven, right? So I'll use the pay as an example. Early on in my tenure, we started a drumbeat of meetings. Every Friday, we'd either do something called a status update brief, or we do a transformation update brief. All right, but for the status update briefs, it was about daily metrics. What are we tracking? How are we measuring our baseline performance Do we even know what our baseline performance is or should be? And it took us a while to figure that out. And then from there, you can measure your performance to plan. Okay, here's where I am. What is the actual standard we're trying to meet? And how are we going to go? How are we going to close that gap from our standard performance, from our baseline performance, to the standards we're trying to meet? And the constant revision and looking at the data and reviewing the results is what you have to do. Over time, it becomes, I won't say boring, but a little repetitive, but you have to keep looking at that same data to make sure you're meeting the standard, because it's about every sailor out there. So do we have contractors? Do we have others involved? Not with the pay effort but we're doing the same thing with recruiting, baseline performance, trying to get at the gap closure plans. And this is not just a My Navy HR thing. The performance to plan, the P2P effort, is a vice chief led thing. So it's done in multiple areas throughout our Navy. So there are contractors involved. CNA is certainly involved in some of this, but there's other contractors involved in other efforts.
So talking about data, one thing we haven't talked about a little bit, the big data,
Sure.
retention.
Sure.
We talk a lot about recruiting, and we'll dive into that in a minute, but how are we doing on retention, and are we retaining the right people?
Yes. So that's a great question, because you'll see I'm a big social media user. I lurk in some places. I comment in others, but I think it's important to understand what our sailors are talking about. But recruiting and retention get lumped in together all the time. Recruiting and retention is not so good. It's not going well. Recruiting is going.
I just want to correct you.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah,
You're
sorry.
not saying that.
So thank you. Yeah. That's what I see and that's what I hear sometimes.
Yeah.
To be clear, retention, I'll get my facts straight here. Retention is at an all-time high.
Yeah.
It really is.
Really?
I won't get into the technical aspect of this, how we measure it by zone and things like that, but our first-term sailors are staying at historic rates. Our senior enlisted folks, 10 years and above careerists are staying, around 110%. Overall, it's about 108% of goal. And we set some really aggressive goals, understanding that recruiting was a challenge. So the incentives that we're setting for sailors to stay Navy, to incentivize them to do the things we need them to do, they are responding. They are absolutely responding. As we develop future initiatives under this billet-based advancement, pillar, we'll have to keep evolving that. We'll have to keep our pulse on the retention of the behavior of the sailor to make sure we're getting the right folks, like you're talking about. It's not just about mass here, but we have to keep the right folks. And we are now starting an effort where we're really getting down to each individual rating. And while right now, we have more sailors eligible for selective reenlistment bonuses than ever before, there are some ratings we should probably start to take some risk in, because they're right around 100% or in excess of 100%. So we can maybe back off their selective reenlistment bonus a little bit, which may cause some challenges there, but you got to figure out where to take a risk. Because we have some really critical skills that we're going to need now and going forward. So how do we incentivize those folks correctly? And it's not always about money. Geographic stability matters as you get more senior. You get more things. You get married. You have children. Families have careers. Family have goals and ideas, and they just have roots. So we get a large population of sailors who make a decision to stay Navy because the opportunity to stay where they are. They don't have to move. And Admiral Bays and NPC and the team down there have done a really good job about stabilization, for lack of a better term. In 2023, 30% of all of our orders were no cost, same geographic area. That's the highest it's been in a long time.
30%. So 30% of people that had orders weren't moving.
Correct.
3 out of 10.
3 out of 10. Sounds low, but it's really high for the Navy because
Well, yeah.
we are expeditionary.
I remember when it was less than 1. I mean, I don't
Yes.
know what the number was,
Right.
but you expected to move when you got orders.
I was PERS 4. We would hover between 18 and 22%, for any given year. And now, 30% last year, trying to make the, good decisions for sailors and the family and the Navy at the same time.
That's great. Admiral, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to continue our conversation with Admiral Cheeseman and talk about other areas of personnel world, some he mentioned, including recruiting.
To a person every time you call Navy Mutual. Richard Scott, currently retired from civilian life and the Navy. I didn't really want to go out and talk to a bunch of salespeople, and I heard about Navy Mutual, and I called them and asked them what they could do for me, and it was very good. I mean, it was no pressure. They want to take care of their customers, and provide a service at a fair price. I'd highly recommend Navy Mutual.
Welcome back. We have some good questions coming in on the platform. Keep those questions coming. I'll get to those shortly. So, Admiral Cheeseman, I have to tell you, as a former CNP's public affairs officer, I know you do a lot of traveling. I know there's an incredible amount of engagement with sailors. What are you hearing? What are you hearing from the sailors? Where are their minds? Kind of a little bit maybe from the retention standpoint.
Sure.
But do you find it inspirational to be out there? I mean, I remember my boss wanted to get on the road as often as possible. The chain to the desk is always there. The chain to testimony and all that is there. But what are you hearing out there?
We hear a lot of great things. Your point about being chained to the desk, any day on travel is better than any day in DC, right? It's awesome because talking to sailors and their families, quite frankly, it's just motivating. Regardless of whether it's my most recent travel or whether it's travel from 2 years ago when there was a lot of concerns, sailors, every question was about, hey, I just need some help. I love the mission. I want to do things. I want to get at it. I just need help in taking care of my family, taking care of things I have to address. But I really want to work for the Navy. It is just motivating. It is absolutely motivating. I really enjoy talking to them. We learn something new every time we go out into the field. Some nuance about a policy concern for one. If it's a policy concern for one, it's a policy concern for others. I think we do a good job, bringing those back. Working hard to figure out, is there some wiggle room where we can make some changes to positively affect people. But I just like the dialogue back and forth. And I am. I know probably a lot of members of the audience know me. I'm fairly blunt when I get out and I talk and I have a good time with sailors. I just tell it like it is. If we can work on things, we work on it. And if we just can't for whatever reason, I'll explain why. But I enjoy the dialogue. I enjoy the transparency. And I will tell you recently, I go up to NLIC, to Newport and talk to the Navy Leadership and Education or Ethics Center and talk to the leadership classes up there. And there's always a spouse class. And hearing from the spouses, sometimes that's probably my hardest engagement at times because of their questions. But even the conversation there has evolved over 2 years from, hey, we have challenges here to, hey, I know you're working hard on things and how can we help? It's been a really interesting conversation going forward. I love the teamwork amongst every sailor out there. I love the interaction. It's just motivating.
So something that I've heard Navy leaders say about the junior folks is they want to be more engaged in that conversation. Right. They want to be involved in that dialogue. Is that what you're seeing?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that is essentially what billet-based advancement is. I mean, hearing feedback from them, from 5, 6, 7 years ago under Admiral Burke when we first started tilting at this idea. A sailor, any sailor, E1 to O10, wants to be involved in the conversation about their next duty station. It should be going forward. And when you have a fully merged distribution and advancement system, and that's what billet-based advancement is. When you're eligible for the next pay grade, you take a job in that pay grade, and then you get advanced. That's a conversation, because once you're eligible, then it's a choice between you, your family, and the Navy, and you get to decide when it's best for you and your family to go into that job. So a lot of good feedback about that, a lot of good feedback from the families about being involved, and that's sort of the goal.
I'm not sure I understand that, though. Billet-based advancement.
Yes.
I mean, I think when you put the three words together from an English standpoint, I think I understand it. But can you tell us a little bit more about what does that mean?
Absolutely. So at the petty officer level, there's 14 ratings in billet-based advancement. We call it detailing marketplace assignment policy because not all ratings are in it. The name doesn't matter. But it comes down to an E4 takes a test for E5. They are found eligible for E5 through the standard process. Now they can enter the marketplace as an E5. Regardless of what their PRD is, They accept orders to an E5 job. They obligate for the full next tour at that E5 job, and the minute they get into that job is when they get promoted. So no more I get, I'm advanced in September and March because that's when the exams were, the results come out 2 months later, everybody get promoted at the same time, and now you're misaligned. It is an alignment of the skill set of the sailor to the skill set needed in that particular job. And I think that is a lot of the cause of our early sailor retention rates, because sailors are running to those jobs at the E5 level.
So, I just want to be clear here, because it sounds too good to be true. Granted, I got out 15 years ago,
Sure.
but so a petty officer can say, I want to go to be stationed here in this billet. The Navy looks at it, says he or she is qualified for that job, goes to that job, and gets advanced into the next pay grade.
Once they're eligible for that pay grade, they can enter the marketplace. Not every billet is advertised. And truth in advertising, they are still prioritized based on Navy needs.
Yep,
but,
sure.
They compete for that billet. There's a sailor scoring criteria. There's a team in Millington that decides who gets the job. They get orders for the job. They observe for the full tour. So, XOs and COs and Command Master Chiefs from the past that were managing EAOS, end of active obligated service, and their projected rotation date, now they're the same because they've obligated for the full tour, and they get advanced the minute they get into that job.
So it's clearly much more focused on the individual.
Yes.
It needs a Navy. I got it. We've got to put men and women on ships, men and women in the fleet, but it's more focused on the people.
Absolutely. And on the senior enlisted side, so for last year's Master Chief Board, the output of that board was not selection to Master Chief, it was screening. So they were eligible. So they were found best and fully qualified, and then they had to enter the marketplace, take an E9 billet, and then the minute they get there, they get promoted. So no more, and this helps the sailor and helps the family, because in the past, congratulations, you've been selected for Master Chief. Yes, you're getting frocked right away, and you're also going to get orders in 60 days with no input because we need you somewhere else. Mm-hmm. Now that quota for advancement is good for 2 years. That sailor doesn't have to enter the marketplace until he or she and their family are ready to do so.
You bring up the Master Chief, and I'd like to drill down in that a little bit. The role of the chief,
Sure.
and the role of that leader, as the Navy's Chief of Naval Personnel. We talk here in the National Chiefs Mess that the chiefs don't run the Navy; they make the Navy run.
Sure.
Right. As a Chief of Naval Personnel, how do you define the role of that chief or that Master Chief you're talking about?
Right. The Chief's Mess is critical to mission accomplishment. I just want to be clear about that. The Chief's Mess, they're not just technical experts. They're not just a certain level of leadership. They take commander's intent and translate it to the entire, the entire unit, the deck plate level, the mid-grade level. Don't forget about the wardroom. A good Chief's Mess. They're not just training junior sailors. They're training, the officer side of those junior sailors too. We're all sailors, right? But they're training the junior officer well. Units that are on step and getting the mission done, I am certain it's because they have a rock-solid Chief's Mess. I rely on my chiefs. Quite frankly, I rely on my fleet Master Chief Delbert Terrell, every day for advice and counsel, and I think the majority of the wardroom feels the same way.
That's fantastic. Let me go to a question here. We have a question from Cedric Pringle, who, by the way, I just have to make an advertisement, an American hero.
Absolutely.
A partner at NNOA. So he puts in a plug for he's looking forward to hosting you at the Joint Symposium in Norfolk on July 29th. Cedric, you owe me for that plug.
I'll be there.
But he asks, can you provide an update on Task Force One Navy initiative and some of the wins from that effort?
Sure, I absolutely can. So a lot of discussions recently about Task Force One Navy. It was a big topic of interest during our most recent hearings as well. Task Force One Navy and the outputs from that really is about, hey, are we creating a Navy that is where all Americans can see themselves succeeding? Really important, right? It's every American. So making sure everybody has the same opportunities to success. And if you read our Culture of Excellence 2.0, cover to cover, you will see the tenets of all that, equity and inclusion work really, deep down into it. Task Force One Navy resulted in a number of things that we were supposed to go do. A great majority of those are already in run, but it really is about the culture. How do you sustain it? It's not just about going, okay, we said we should do X coming out of Task Force 1 Navy. Well, X got done, right? It's how do you sustain that effort, and that is through culture. So I refer to Task Force 1 Navy report often, not because we're trying to make diversity for diversity's sake in the Navy. It is about making sure we have the right culture to make sure everybody has the same opportunity of success. It was a great piece of work, and we're working hard at making sure we keep that going through our culture efforts.
Great, thank you. Let me go stay with the questions here. And there's a couple comments that from Jared Jensen and Rob Lightbuddy that I'm going to convert into a question, and it's about funding. How do you pay for these initiatives? The comments are, Jared says, this description of billet-based promotion is actually similar to how our company does promotions.
Sure.
How about that as a compliment?
That's fantastic.
I don't know if you intended it as a
corporate America. Awesome.
Exactly. But it can result in hard chargers accelerating their careers, which is often good for retention. And then Rob Lightbuddy says, I could see where that will increase expenses from sailors moving to new billets, cross-country, et cetera. So let me just take those two comments into expense, because
Sure.
I've got to believe that's one of your biggest challenges. You just testified, you spent some time on the Hill. How do you battle the battle of the budget, and how's it going?
Right. The battle of the budget is interesting, right? So, I mean, I won't talk to the overall budget and what the fiscal responsibility caps have required CNO and SecNav to do. That's really not my lane. But from a people perspective, we know what our budget is, and we operate with the inside of it. So when we try new things, when we try new programs, we have to, the way the POM works, where the budget works, you're essentially programming for 2 years in the future. So it's always about finding a program that may be under executing a little bit so you can move those funds to start the next good idea. When it comes to billet-based advancement, it could result in increases, but the team has done a really good job. I mentioned the 30% no-cost orders, because it doesn't have to be about, moving across country. You don't have to go from San Diego to Norfolk or Norfolk to San Diego if you're a surface sailor to meet mission, to take in the next challenging billet. I guarantee you there's probably one right across the pier that, where it needs to get done, or on your own ship. There are opportunities to stay on the own ship and continue there. So it is a balance. We track it. We track a bunch of different statistics, data that we've already mentioned to see where the pulse is. But our sailors are pretty clear on where they stand with this. They like the choice, because some people want to move and some don't. So balancing it within the caps that we have as far as the budget for permanent change of station, I have a great team that manages all that.
So, Admiral Cheeseman, I have to talk about robotics, because I'm just kind of jazzed up about this. So I'm going to shift subjects here and talk real opportunity or whatever. Just again, been out of the Navy for a while, and I'm going to brag a little bit here. The Navy is the first service to establish a robotics specialty expertise. How integral is that new rating to the Navy's future?
I think it's critical, right? So, and I don't know, we don't have a crystal ball. I don't know exactly where this is going. It's very small, it's nascent. We've got, about 100 or so in the rating as we're allowing certain people with certain skill sets to convert over. But I'll just give you a little vignette. We've been operating, drones off of the back of ships for many, many, many years now. And in some respects, we still need a lot of help from contractors to do so. So really, in conflict, who's going to do that kind of work? Who's going to operate those systems, those unmanned systems in the future? Not just from the standard, how to get the drone off and back on the ship, but who's going to make sure that the integrity of the communication system is rock solid? Who's going to understand mission planning? Who's going to understand the machine learning that gets involved there? And if we're talking about AI decision making going forward, in a time of conflict, it can't necessarily be somebody that we've been relying on in the past. So we're working at it. We're trying to figure out what the next step is here, but I think the first step is understanding the need and driving for it. We have a lot of great folks in the unrestricted line community diving at this to a number of remote operated vehicles. We're just trying to make sure we generate the workforce to keep pace with that technology.
Yeah, so I asked the question because I'm kind of jazzed up about the idea.
We can get you back in, we if you want to do it.
So I'm looking for a possible transition. So don't go there.
Okay.
No, but I asked also from a recruiting standpoint because talk about coming back in, talk about going in as recruiting, the opportunities. So let's dive into, let's try to use most of the rest of the time here today to talk about recruiting. And I purposely teed up robotics because I wanted to come at this topic from an opportunity, not from a woe is me.
Right.
I mean, it's hard. There's no question about it. And the services, all the services have had problems
That's right.
with recruiting, looking at goals and things like that. So starting big picture, CNP.
Right.
How's recruiting going?
Yeah, recruiting is much better, is the top line here. Before I answer that question, I want to set the stage a little bit, because it's not just about do you meet mission or you don't meet mission, because that mission is a little bit fungible. The mission is based, in the past, has been based about what can we afford to bring in? You know, how many new sailors do we think we can afford? And it wasn't necessarily always the conversation of what sailors do we need, right? So I'll tell you this. So in 2022, it's a fact, we met our mission, but it was 33,000 plus sailors. But 2022 was the lowest contracting rate for any new recruits in the last 10 years.
What is that?
The number of sailors actually signing a contract to join the Navy.
Got it.
The reason we met mission is because we put about 10,000 people that would normally be in reserve from our delayed entry program into boot camp. And to ensure you have sailors going, steady state through boot camp, you need that delayed entry program to level load, folks going up the Great Lakes. In 2023, we had 6,000 more contracts than we did in 2022, but we missed mission. So the fact that recruiters are doing much better is sort of lost in the noise by the top headline of Navy missed mission. So that's true. I just want to make sure people understand our recruiting force, they're doing great. They are killing it. Right? And they're motivated, they're energized, and they're really, really getting after the mission for us. In 2024, the mission that we missed in 23 was 37,000 plus sailors, is what we thought we needed. We recognized that we missed the mission, and then we set some really audacious goals. We upped our mission. We acknowledged the miss, and we said we're going to double down.
You missed goal.
We missed goal in
year,
23.
And you upped
Absolutely.
goal for this year.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So we raised our goal to 40,600 sailors. We basically said we missed it by 7,000 last year. We're going to add 3,000 to our mission this year, and we're going to go run at a new number. And right now, our projected miss to that new number is 6,200. But I am certain, because we are closing that gap every day through data analytics, through targeted marketing, that at the end of the year, that miss will be much less than 6,200. Exactly what it is, I don't know. We have people coming through the door every day, like that young lady we saw earlier today.
Yeah.
Very exciting. But the recruiters are absolutely getting after the mission. We're not going to miss by 6,200. We may make it, we may not, but we'll see on September 30th.
So, Admiral Cheeseman, you're basically Vice President HR, one of the biggest companies in the United States of America, right? I mean, we here at the Navy Memorial, we hear shipbuilders, we hear defense industry. The challenge of recruiting for them is the same as it is for you. Arguably, they're competing with the Navy.
We are, absolutely.
And then across the country, the job opportunities. Take it to a higher level, up above the Navy. What do we need to do in this country to create those opportunities or that ethos or that mindset that service people like you and me?
Right.
We both joined the Navy with the idea we knew exactly when we were getting out. I did not watch the Blue Angels with the idea I was coming in for a career. How do we do that in this country? And then I'll come back down into what you're doing in the Navy.
So a couple of thoughts there. It really comes down to propensity. Right now, about 9% of our target population, 17 to 24-year-olds, even think about joining the Navy. Right, so that's pretty low. Back in the golden years per se, it was around 13-14%, and we know through our data analytics that for every 1% of propensity, that equals about 1,400 new contracts. But it's not just about service, in the government or the Navy or the Department of Defense writ large. Even if somebody tries to come into the Navy and they're not physically capable, there's another reason why they can't get in the service. We ought to have a very strong conversation with that service-oriented individual about how they can serve their country differently. Like you mentioned, shipbuilding, the build submarine effort, any other government service. It doesn't just have to be about the Navy. I want somebody to join the Navy first and foremost. But we need to do a better job of making sure that if somebody is inclined to serve and they can't for some reason, there's other ways for folks to help get the job done. SecNav recently announced in Miami during Fleet Week a national maritime call to service. It is just this thing where we need to do a better job doing that. And I would hope that we would be able to talk with industry and discuss with industry so they can say things just like that. Hey, join the Navy, earn a skill set, and companies like us will hire you. Quite frankly, they don't have to train them. We've trained them. I'm certain once we get sailors in the Navy, I'll be able to retain the number I need because we have that culture, we have that quality. But we get 30,000 or so that leave the Navy every year regardless. Wouldn't it be nice if they knew that somebody on the other end is ready for them? We need to make sure we have that transactional dialogue a little stronger.
So, and what does that transactional dialogue mean? So first there's the dialogue with the sailors and the opportunities they have if they opt to get out. But coming down a little bit to the Navy, what are your thoughts on responsibilities of people like me,
right,
or parents or influencers, in order to explain those opportunities to serve, whether,
yes,
again, to your point, in industry or here for government, in military, the Park Service, what do you tell groups when you talk to them when they ask, what can I do?
Yeah, I mean, that's incredibly important. I think that is the root of our propensity issues. That's the root cause. We get plenty of young people that in today's day and age, they'll click on a link, they'll fill out a form, they'll give us their name, they'll give us their contact data. We have an initial discussion with them. And then the motivation gets lost when that conversation is over and they go back home because they don't have anybody else to talk to about it, to talk about the opportunity because there's no frame of reference. We're a long way from Vietnam, we're a long way from prior service, large groups of people having prior service. It's okay to share your story, be very vocal about it, get into social media, do 140 characters and just tell a great story. The more we share those opportunities, the more somebody will be able to have a positive conversation about it. I just want a coach or a guidance counselor or a teacher or an uncle or an aunt when talking to a young person to say, well, have you thought about the Navy? Because they've heard of a positive experience. We need to share those positive experiences. It will help. We have seen it through our dedicated social media outreach and campaigns there, trying to just build propensity, build understanding. We have people responding to that and reacting to it and talking to recruiters because they've seen stuff in social media, because people like us have shared a story, had a chance encounter on the street that ended up positive. All of that matters. I mean, every one of us is a sailor from the moment we joined the Navy until long after we've retired. Sharing those stories always helps.
So it strikes me, right? My dad was in the Army, and I grew up, he was talking service all the time.
Right.
To your point, grandparents served, and so you live with that in the back of your mind as an option. Maybe
right,
mom or dad didn't encourage
right,
you to go in, but always knew that was an option. And with less and less people serving in the military, which is, some would say, a good thing in,
right,
in our form of government, that not all of us, we don't have forced conscription.
Sure.
But I guess hearing you, what it strikes me is the people sharing those stories are today's sailors.
Yes.
Those sailors who are in the Navy today.
Yes.
What is their role, and what are you doing, what's the Navy doing to encourage that?
It is just that. We have something called the Every Sailor a Recruiter campaign. It initially started out as just that, just share your stories, tell your stories, influence young people. I mean, I know young people live in social media and other streaming, type services. Just being able to have a positive, experience, a positive discussion is pretty important. Since then, CNO has doubled down and challenged every command to find at least one future sailor and shepherd them through the system. That has not generated a lot of leads, but a couple hundred folks are in boot camp now because of individual commands. But where it's really helped is the influencers, because the conversation is ongoing and consistent and persistent.
So, Admiral Cheeseman, I have to tell you, there's a whole lot of comments here about recruiting.
Sure.
And Tom Snee American hero,
Yes.
Former Fleet Reserve leader, is a teacher. And I just want to put a plug into him because he says, this teacher talks Navy always to middle and high school students.
Awesome.
And I think that's your point.
Perfect. Thanks for the outreach. I appreciate it. That's great.
So let me ask one more question, I think, before we wrap up, and that's boot camp. I think we would be remiss if we didn't talk about boot camp. I think what I heard that woman talking to you outside was about boot camp, about the opportunity, but there was a little bit of mystery in her mind.
Good.
So, well, exactly,
That's
right?
right.
So what do you tell people that boot camp can't be what it was 40 years ago,
That's
30
exactly
years
right.
ago? What are you doing? What changes are you implementing to make boot camp more appealing, or quite frankly, less unappealing?
Right.
You know, how do you make it more appealing to that high school, the young woman who's thinking about joining the Navy?
Sure. It is all about trust. I mean, it has to be, right? So the minute you step off the bus, right? I mean, it's not the Holiday Inn, right? It's not going to be not stressful, right? But it doesn't have to be so totally stressful that we can't build trust in the institution at the individual level from the minute they step off. So, you know, the team up there does a very good job with something we call processing days on the front end. You know, get them acclimated a little bit. You know, before you get straight into the basic military training, there is a front end processing. We're starting to build that trust in the very beginning. Right? Even before that, for a certain subset of our folks, we do have future sailor prep courses now, both on the physical fitness side and on the academic side. On the physical fitness side, if you're not in Navy standards, you can still go to boot camp. You know, you can still go to Great Lakes at the future sailor prep course. If you're up to 6% over the body fat requirement, and we'll get you into shape over the first 3 weeks. That really starts to build trust. Then you graduate from there. Once you're in standards, you move into basic military training. And we found after, you know, there's about 1,000 people have gone through that already. Some great talent there who just weren't, you know, ready conditionally to be in the Navy, and they are. They're already able to take leadership roles once they get into boot camp. They're helping others acclimate into the system, helping others build trust because they've been in the system for about 3 or 4 weeks beforehand, and that's working out well. We've even had a couple going on to be the honor graduate, where they were not in standards when they got off the bus. They got into standards, they got motivated, and they were the honor graduate 10 weeks later when they graduated. On the academic side, same thing. It started out as because we started bringing in a little more Category 4 folks, less complex ratings, low, you know, on the scale as far as the standardized testing goes. We put them into that course just to build the foundation of their academic environments or their academic skills, and then they're able to change ratings if their scores increase. If they don't, as long as they're not regressing, they continue on and they get in there. So those courses are foundation building for their future in the service, and they're trust building, quite frankly. And then a few other things. You know, a number of years ago, we added 2 weeks to the end of it. Once you know the battle stations are done, they get their Navy ball cap, where it's essentially life skills. You know, we're not just throwing them to the wolves. Okay, here's things you need to think about as far as money and paychecks and services, and how you, for those who have a family, how you can take care of your families and what the resources are available. And just aligning standards. You know, if we have a fleet standard, we don't have some crazy, unrealistic accession standard in Great Lakes that they don't have to meet. Aligning it between what we're doing there and the fleet is pretty important. So it's just, there's something not new when they get out into the fleet. So a lot of good feedback from young people, and we're running hard at it.
So, Admiral Cheeseman, we've talked a lot over the last decades about the frustration of our youth not being eligible to join the service. I want to tie this to the beginning of our conversation about culture. I mean, you're bringing together a culture of success, in my words, right? A culture of hey, we can give you a hand up and help you join this organization. And then that's all they're looking for is an opportunity.
Our young people, you know, the eligible recruiting population is, you know, what they want is pretty clear. They want to work for people that they respect and trust. They want to know why a little more than you or I did, and that's fine. Yeah. They want to be connected to the people around them, and they want to be included in the mission. That's it. It's pretty simple. And building a culture where they can respect their leaders, where they trust that we're going to get things done for them so they can get at that mission like they want to, pretty powerful. You know, the action in the Red Sea now proves it out. Those young people, you know, the kids are all right. They're doing great, and we're in a good spot.
Admiral Cheeseman, I could go on doing this for hours, and clearly you could. I don't even have to ask questions, I don't think. I think we got to wrap it up. I promised you we'd be out of here in an hour, and I'm about to violate that, I think. But before we wrap up, anything you want to add that I didn't mention, or that you want to mention to this audience of what I would call audience of recruiters and sailors?
That's right. I mean, everybody listening is a recruiter, clearly, because the fact that they're listening now means they have an interest in they have the best interest of the Navy at heart, right? So sharing those stories, talking about what we can do, talking about the service is pretty important. But what I'll leave you with is just that, the Navy is a place where, everybody, all the eligible population, every American can see themselves succeeding. Everybody's got the same opportunity for success when they join the Navy. We work hard to maintain that, and we're doing, the young people are doing great here. I just want to, I can't wait to, meet them when they get in. Can't wait to attack the mission together, and they can trust us that we got their best interests at heart.
That's awesome, and I saw it firsthand this morning.
Right.
I wish everybody could have seen that interaction early this afternoon when that happened. Admiral Cheeseman, thank you very much for providing this SITREP, and thank you again. I had the opportunity to watch in the cheap seats the challenge of being the Chief of Naval Personnel, and I just want to thank you personally and on behalf of everybody here at the Navy Memorial for what you're doing as a Chief of Naval Personnel. Thank you very, very much.
No, it's my pleasure. People matter. Thanks very much.
Thank you. So, and thank you all for joining us today for our situation report from the Navy's Chief of Naval Personnel. I'd like to again thank our sponsor, Navy Mutual Insurance. We have a lot going on here at the Navy Memorial this month as we're in the season. So Memorial Day is coming up. Monday, May 27th, we'll host our annual wreath laying ceremony here, both in person and stream live. Our honored guest laying that wreath will be the Vice Chief of Naval Operations, Admiral Jim Kilby. So please join us for that. And then followed quickly by that is our series of summer events. The annual Battle of Midway wreath laying ceremony on June 3rd at 10 a.m., which marks our nation's greatest naval victory, turned the tide of the war, and enabled the Europe First strategy, which led to victory in World War II. We'll stream that live as well. And then our concerts and our movies, our Tuesdays and Thursdays events. If you're here in the D.C. area, we'll host the Navy Band concerts every Tuesday evening at 7 p.m., and we'll host Movies on the Memorial every Thursday at dusk. We've got a great lineup of movies, so bring a yoga mat or a lawn chair and join us for the movies. So as we wrap up today, though, I'd like to say farewell. This will be my last SITREP. Over the holidays, I decided to move to the next chapter of my life, and this week, we're very excited that we announced that Vice Admiral John Naval, the former Chief of Naval Personnel, and the person that actually Admiral Cheeseman relieved as the Chief of Naval Personnel, Admiral John Naval will be the new President and CEO of the Navy Memorial. I will miss the Navy Memorial tremendously, but I'm so excited about the future of our Navy Memorial. We have a great team here that will reach even new heights under Admiral Naval's leadership. So today, my thank you is even a little more heartfelt. Thank you. Thank you for everything you do to support the men and women of our Navy. And thank you for your support to the Navy Memorial that enables us to be a vehicle to support the tremendous men and women and let them know that they are so sincerely appreciated by a grateful nation. So today I say, for the last time, I wish you fair winds and following seas. Thank you very much.